Greetings, good time of day to you. Today we're going to be speaking about growth mindset versus a fixed mindset. When we say fixed mindset, we should scorn. We say growth mindset, we should be happy. Because growth mindset is clearly the better of the two, as a plethora of examples will demonstrate. First of all, what is growth mindset? It's as opposed to a fixed mindset. A growth mindset is a love of the challenge, a desire to constantly continue learning and challenging yourself and learning from failures and persevering, all that good stuff. Whereas a fixed mindset anticipates having effortless flawlessness and does not enjoy feeling unintelligent through failure and does not see lack of success as potential learning opportunities. Children naturally have a growth mindset. We have to learn some of the most difficult things of our life before we can even talk, namely talking, as well as walking, and learning to exist in a world full of challenges. So it's funny that babies are better at doing something than a lot of adults. So clearly there's a time at some point when we come online cognitively where there can be a possibility of falling into this dreaded fixed mindset. The idea that IQ tests promote fixed mindset. It was not their initial intention. People have since come to the idea that one test can determine intelligence for an entire life, and it's set in stone, it's rigid and immutable. But it was originally designed just to assess who was benefiting or not benefiting from public schools in France during a time when resources were very limited. Intelligence can be drastically altered. This is a saying of growth mindset. The idea that you can improve yourself, you can make yourself smarter, you can make yourself more acute. There's a lot in common with the Dispenza monologue about the positive mindset having such a great impact. We now believe that nature versus nurture is an obsolete thought. It's a complex, nuanced combination of nature and nurture. People may differ in initial aptitude, but everyone can improve. Your true potential is unknowable until you try. That falls right in line with the previous statement that it doesn't matter where you start, it's where you finish. The fixed mindset, when confronted with failure, will say lines like, I'm an idiot, I'm a loser. Whereas the growth mindset would tend towards thoughts like, well, I need to work more effectively, I need to try harder. Myself, when confronted with challenges learning machine learning, there was temptation to move towards the first mindset. However, sufficient mental strengthening allowed for growth mindset, and found out that it wasn't actually as hard as anticipated, especially when approaching it with an open mind. Everyone can be upset, but fixed mindsets will allow that displeasure to apply labels to themselves. Being labeled, not something that anyone should aspire to. The growth mindset will say, nothing ventured, nothing gained. Fixed mindset, be nothing ventured, nothing lost. They love that security of not experiencing failure and stick to comfortable waters. It turns out everybody is flawed at assessing their own skills, but fixed mindset individuals account for almost all of the inaccuracy. They tend to vastly over or underestimate their skills, whereas fixed mindset people are very realistic, or sorry, growth mindset people tend to be very realistic and very good at assessing what needs to be improved. The constant drive for challenge really works well with that approach. Exceptional minds have a talent for identifying their weaknesses. The main trait for personal growth is perseverance. It's more than talent, more than privilege. It's about sticking to the plan. I remember learning about athletes, and their number one thing for success, other than perseverance, is just avoiding injury, which allows you to continue training and continue getting better. Whereas somebody who just tries to be the best all the time is more prone to injury, and one injury can ruin an entire career. Fear of failure prevents fixed-minded individuals from trying. That's because it's safe, as we already covered. When it comes to relationships, fixed mindset people along the same lines will look for somebody who worships them, somebody who accepts everything about them as great and basically strokes their ego. Whereas when you're looking for a growth mindset individual, you want somebody to challenge you. I personally am in a lovely relationship with someone who challenges me very much. And let's just say it's great. It's just great. We don't want to divide the world into weak and strong, or smart and dumb, but simply into learners and non-learners. Because that's really what determines how far someone can go, is the desire for constant improvement, constant challenge. Now, the story about 4-year-olds with puzzles. The young children tend to have more of a growth mindset and will want to be challenged more. So they will always be trying harder puzzles, as opposed to other children who just want to do the same puzzle over and over again to get that same joy of completion. And this is very strange to a growth mindset person. Why would you want to just keep doing the same thing over and over again? Brain waves also tell the story. When there's the people who have growth mindset tend to show positive responses whenever they're challenged, whereas fixed mindsets tend to show positive responses whenever their ego is stroked, whenever they encounter knowledge that they already know and thus can perform, and thus validates their superiority or smartness. Then we talk about CEO disease. And that can be when people get to the top and they're used to being the best. Then they might surround themselves with yes men and just sycophants, and basically lose touch with what's going on and ultimately fail, even though they're receiving nothing but warm praise. And the key person here was, or the token person here was Lee Iacocca, who I remember hearing about in the early 70s. He was the GM of General Motors, and basically wasn't stopped list. He got rid of all his critics, surrounded himself by people that agreed with him, and lost touch with what people wanted, what the market was demanding, because they basically had a monopoly up to that point. And ultimately, the Japanese manufacturers were listening to what people wanted. And in the late 70s, the American companies got just destroyed. They got completely outsold and almost went bankrupt because of that very CEO disease. They lost touch. They stopped challenging themselves. Mia Hamm, one of the probably the greatest female soccer player of all time, was famous for always challenging, always playing with better, more skilled players to bring up her skill rather than dominating in an easy league. So when she was 10, she joined the 11-year-old boys team, and she went to the best college and played with the best people, and was always striving for greatness. And Christopher Reeve, Superman, breaks his neck on a horse, paralyzed from the neck down. Doctors told him he was crazy for trying to reactivate his muscles through extensive electrotherapy and all kinds of experimental ideas. He was given no chance of success, told he was just setting himself up for failure. But his thought was, well, what else am I going to do with my time? Just blow out a little thing and cruise around in the wheelchair. Yeah, so to the shock of medical science, after 8 years, he was able to start moving muscles again, then legs and arms, and then his torso, and effectively revitalized an entire field of research and gave hope to, millions of people that may be suffering from spinal cord injury. They did a study with chemistry students, the pre-med students that had always been used to getting A's and just acing stuff and were well on their way to becoming doctors. They finally hit their organic chemistry course, and a huge chunk of them that were unaccustomed to failure just started hating chemistry. They started not enjoying it. When they were challenged, they would ignore the section or skim over the section and focus on the sections they were already good at, rather than the growth mindset folks who would double down and work extra hard to learn those challenging problems. The fixed mindset people that feel smart when they're flawless, and growth mindset people feel happy when they're challenged, when they're learning. Then there's graduate students. There's a story about I think it was Duke University accepted 6 graduate students per year to a specific program, and they got the cream of the crop, and just absolutely stellar students with rave reviews and perfect GPAs. But as soon as they got there, most of them felt immediately like idiots, because they looked at the people making publications and teaching lectures and the advanced students applying for grants, and all of a sudden they can't do that. I can't do that. But isn't that what school is for? To teach us to do these things. So really the mindset makes the person in all these cases. The idea that the test score is forever is a very fixed mindset idea. People that might get a low score on an aptitude test when they're 12, and they can carry that with them for the rest of their life, thinking that test was their crystal ball and it set them to a lower strata for the rest of their life. Can you guess who wasn't affected that way? Growth mindset people. That's right. Even Cézanne, one of the most influential people in modern art. Apparently, if you look at some of his early work, it's pretty bad. There was some stuff that foreshadowed the success he would eventually have, but there's a lot of growing pains. And really, again, it was the perseverance that really allowed him to come into his own. And the book spends a lot of time poking fun at John McEnroe, because it's fun to make fun of John McEnroe. He was the most famous crybaby probably in all of sports. He's notorious. I mean, I've heard of him well before the book many times for his litany of excuses and poor performances and blaming other people. It was like one match he lost because of a backache, and then because of a fever. One because he was too hot, one because he was too cold. It's never his fault. Sadly, I felt that one, because that was exactly me in badminton. I would play, it was always like, oh, my racket was chipped. My grip was off. My grip was too wet. I couldn't grip the thing. My shoe had too much dust on it. I was flying around. The lineman didn't call my shots right. I had an excuse every time, and it felt great because it was never my fault. One of the biggest problems was I was like 50 pounds overweight trying to play a game for Pixies. I probably should have addressed that, but regardless, it wasn't a good look, and I only had mediocre success, even though I loved the game. They told a story. Carol Dweck tells a story when she went fishing with her husband and some of his friends, and they waited for hours, and finally she caught a trout, and her husband ran over and said, "Oh, life with you is so exciting." And later that night, his friend said, "So, Jim, how are you coping?" And he didn't even know what they meant. He said, "What are you talking about?" And the wife knew. She thought, "Oh, well, clearly they can't handle the fact that I had success and they didn't." And that certainly sounds like a fixed mindset story. You aren't a failure until you assign blame. That's the kick. Once you start to blame other things other than looking for methods of improvement, then all is lost, basically. The way people act, or the way that people react to depression is also greatly influenced by their mindset. Fixed mindset people tend to just be paralyzed and unable to do anything and just mope, and rather than trying to keep doing stuff. Like growth mindset people will continue to do everything, force themselves to do it. The more depressed they get, the more they force themselves on. I mean, they're both depressed, even though one doesn't look it. I think that continually keeping busy is probably one of the best cures. The stories we have, even from childhood, can instill these mindsets into people. I remember reading The Little Engine That Could, The Tortoise and the Hare, and she even mentioned Scuffy the Tugboat, which was like literally my favorite book as a kid. I love Scuffy. Scuffy is the man. Scuffy, if you're watching this, inspiration. But the message in a lot of those books was, it's like, just keep trying and keep trying. Some people have talent, other people are just plodders. And if you just don't give up, maybe the smart people will have a lapse in judgment and you can sneak through. But in actuality, it's the plodders that are going to continue to get better and eventually probably outskill the hare, per se. Growth mindset allows you to love what you're doing despite the difficulties and failures. Why is effort so terrifying? Well, because it exposes us to failure. Carol Dweck talks about when she was in high school, she was #1 in French. The teacher encouraged her to enter a citywide French competition. She declined. She was #1 in math in her school. And the teacher again suggested, go try this citywide competition. And again, she declined, because why go from being a success to being a failure? Because clearly the competition is going to go up. I mean, I felt that one. Our team was #1 in the Victoria math competition in grade 10. And then we were second to last place when we went to the provincial competition in Vancouver. At the time, in my limited mindset, it was pretty damn frustrating. I didn't really double down and try harder at math. I just kind of was like, well, I guess I'm just pretty good. Thinking that you're 100% perfect can make it worse, because then any struggles in the road reflect on inadequacy rather than stepping stones to a better you.